So welcome everyone. I am Megan, Outreach and Training Coordinator here. Thank you for being here for our final Lunch and Learn of April for Child Abuse Prevention Month. We are joined by Sam, who is a trauma therapy therapist. She's been with the agency for 7 years. She is a wealth of knowledge. So I am going to turn over to her in a minute, but if you all have questions, feel free to put them in the chat and Sam will get to them at the end, or if it's pertaining to a certain slide, I will interrupt her to let her answer. But again, without further ado, Sam, go ahead and take it away.
All right. So first of all, thank you for being here. I am happy to present today and teach you a little bit about trauma therapy and what we do in our department. So first, I'm sure if you've been to one of these lunch and learns, you've already heard, but Journey Center for Safety and Healing provides services that foster safety and healing to those affected by DV and child abuse and prevents abuse through education, advocacy, and systemic change. We envision a community where safety and well-being are achieved by empowering people to find a path toward healthy, thriving relationships. That's really important. Just want to give a little disclaimer that talking about DV and child abuse can be triggering for some with feelings, memories. So if you need to take a step away, you need to leave the presentation, feel free to do that and take care of yourself as needed. So for today, I am hoping that you will be able to learn more about the services offered to clients in the trauma therapy process. You will learn more about trauma-informed care and our unique treatment approach. You will learn about factors that impact the treatment of trauma and be able to identify why our services are so important. So, what we do is we assist clients in reducing the impact the trauma has had on their emotional and mental functioning through the development of healthy coping skills and increased understanding about trauma and the impact that it's had on them. So we do offer outpatient individual and group services to children and adults, okay? No groups are currently being offered due to COVID, but I'll tell you a little bit about them anyway. Typically, we'd be offering at least one group at a time, sometimes two. Groups are closed and time limited. Some group topics may include trauma-sensitive yoga, life skills, coping skills, child trauma therapy groups, and sensory coping for trauma in children, just to name a few. So for the individual therapy that we're currently offering, we offer that via in-person or telehealth based on the needs of the client. And typically those are offered about weekly or every other week or monthly towards the end of a client's stretch with therapy. It's worth noting here that we don't offer crisis services. In general, the type of therapy we offer is, like I said, about one hour a week. And so that's not to be confused with they have an immediate emotional crisis. We encourage them to call a helpline. We give clients a wealth of resources for that. But our therapists are engaged in seeing clients for several hours a day. So we're not available to kind of deal with those in the moment crises. And so we give resources for in the community for people that do help with that. Typically, we offer sessions from about late morning to early evening, no weekends. So if someone's interested, just to kind of give you an idea of typically when sessions are offered for us. So in order to be a client, you must be at least 4 years of age and have experienced, witnessed, or been exposed to domestic violence, child abuse, or another interpersonal trauma. If you know someone who needs services, I would encourage them to call our helpline. The number is right there if you want to jot that down, or it's all over our website and all that good stuff. Clients will get a brief intake and they'll be placed on our wait list. Then when your name comes to the top of the wait list, the assigned therapist gives you a call and you are scheduled for an assessment. Then you develop your treatment goals with your therapist, and then you get working on those goals in therapy. That's kind of how we do things. So I'm going to touch on trauma-informed care briefly today, just to give you an idea of what it is if you don't know. Trauma-informed care is a model that shifts the focus on the client from kind of this idea of what's wrong with you to more of what happened to you. And then for this, all this information, it comes straight from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, also known as SAMHSA. So if you hear me saying that, you can get all this information and research from their website. SAMHSA's 6 guiding principles of trauma-informed care should be evident in every part of a client's care, including with each staff member and the agency as a whole. Physical and emotional safety. Examples of this are like we have lights in the parking lot for if it's dark, clients are coming, going to appointments. We want a nice welcoming face reception as soon as they get in to help them feel comfortable. We create our offices with artwork and soft lighting to make them feel like a calm, safe place for clients to be. Trustworthiness and transparency should be evidenced in all of our policies, procedures, and practices with clients, staff, and volunteers. We want to do what we need to do. We need to do what we say we're going to do and be accountable and be a trustworthy partner for clients so that they can place that trust in us. Peer support, our justice system advocacy program offers support groups for clients, which can be really beneficial. Sometimes I offer clients resources to memoirs about survivors or survivors who are speakers, or even give generic client success stories, just to help them feel that they're not alone and know that they can find support in peers. Collaboration and mutuality means working with clients. We actively seek to notice and reduce power differentials. So we are the experts in trauma, but we are not the expert on the client. The client or survivor is the expert on themselves. And that is first and foremost in trauma-informed care. We know that the client is the expert on themselves. We work with them and we don't assume to know their needs. Empowerment, voice, and choice kind of is what it says. Our clients have previously had someone take away their control, so we want to help them get that back. We want to help them feel more empowered, to be assertive and start making choices for themselves again. Cultural, historical, and gender issues. It's very crucial to be aware of and competent in various issues that affect our clients, such as if they ask us to use preferred pronouns like they or them, that we're doing that to be respectful to them. If, for example, I'm white, and if I have a client that has a different racial or cultural or ethnic background than myself, we're having a conversation about that so that we can address any issues if there is any, meet the client where they're at, and possibly even adjust the assigned therapist if necessary to make sure that the approach remains trauma-informed and the client feels comfortable with who they're working with, feels that they understand them. So I'm going to move on next to SAMHSA's 4 key assumptions about a trauma-informed approach. So the first one is that we realize the impact of trauma and understand those paths to recovery. Second, we recognize the signs and symptoms of trauma, not only in clients, but in staff members, community partners, whoever we're coming into contact with. We want to be able to recognize when someone is in that type of distress. Respond to trauma, like I said before, by incorporating this knowledge in agency policies, procedures, and practices. Resisting re-traumatization by recognizing that certain stressful or toxic situations in organizations can create trauma for a client. I have a good example here. So I had a client come in for a first appointment immediately having a panic attack in the lobby. Our wonderful receptionist was there, recognized the client's distress right away, let her in. A little bit about our lobby. It is locked on both sides. It's double locked for safety. So you have to be let in to the first door to get in the lobby. And then when it's time for you to come into the agency, you have to be let in as well. So you can always get out, but you're kind of stuck like a little fishbowl sometimes it feels like. So what we didn't know was that this client actually had been locked in a closet several times as a punishment as a child. And so she immediately felt trapped and stifled and scared. And so the receptionist and I and the client worked on identifying this issue, meeting the client where she was at. We told her, don't come early anymore, come right at your appointment time. The receptionist was able to let her right in, and I would promptly get her from the area to take her back for her appointment. So that's just one example how we resist re-traumatization and really meet clients where they're at to fulfill these 4 key assumptions. Okay. So our treatment approach, it is trauma-informed and strengths-based, client-centered, and eclectic, which means that it differs based on the needs of each client. So the treatment approach for each client is going to look very different. The reason clients want to come to us or are recommended to us is often because of this unique and trauma-informed approach. All of our therapists are currently trained in evidence-based treatments, which, if you don't know, means that there is a good body of research showing statistical significance, which means that it's shown that they have a tremendous impact effectively to help clients get better, which is great. So some of these that our current staff are trained in include cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy, or TFCBT, which is for children and adolescents, and EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing therapy. That's a long one. But these are just a few of the ones that we're trained in that are trauma specific, but we're also trained in other modalities that we use, such as art interventions, play interventions with children, motivational interviewing, just to kind of even get the tip of the iceberg with all the things that we're trained in. So the type of trauma and length of trauma are 2 factors that impact treatment quite greatly. Most of our clients come to us with both complex and chronic trauma. So complex trauma means that the trauma that they've had have been varying types. So think here, sexual abuse, financial abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse, different types of abuse. With chronic trauma, we think of repeated exposure to trauma. So an example of chronic and complex trauma would be a client is sexually abused in childhood. They're verbally abused all throughout the home growing up, and then is physically and financially abused in a relationship in adulthood. And this is very common for us to see clients coming in with both chronic and complex trauma. We meet the clients where they're at, which is a really important part of our approach. Some clients are currently in abusive relationships when they come to us, or are dealing with shame from sexual abuse as long as 40 years ago as a child, and we're the first people that they're telling about it. Something I noticed when I came to work here was that most of my clients who are adults actually had some form of trauma in their childhood. You might be surprised to find out how many clients, I've worked with hundreds of clients at this point, how many clients have actually had childhood sexual trauma, unfortunately. We also see many children who have been abused or witnessed interpersonal violence. Pages are sticking together. Some clients come in with several basic and safety needs that we need to address. So think bills, housing, needing to sign up for Medicaid or food assistance, needing shelter to leave an abuser. We cannot move on to developing skills and processing trauma until we help the client establish these first, or even better, get them connected to another community agency, like with a case manager, who can help them fulfill those needs. And this is why we have no time limit on the length of treatment. And this differentiates us from some of the other trauma providers in the area. We know it takes several years to fully process all of the impacts of chronic and complex trauma. And we want to leave that therapy time open so that as long as clients still have trauma they need to process and work on, that they have a place with us here to continue doing that. If you haven't seen this before, I stole this. It's just Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So if you haven't seen it before, basically how people work through is they start at that bottom rung. Those are your most basic needs. And then as you kind of work up, you're working on more higher order needs until you get to self-actualization, so to speak. So this just really reiterates what I was speaking about how clients come in. Most of the clients come in on either that red or orange level. So like I mentioned, they're coming in on those basic or safety needs, many of them. And we need to address those before they can work up to the yellow and the green. Excuse me, love and belonging, I like to think of as like support, because most of these people have been isolated because of the abuse, and I should say many of them. And so we want to work on love and belonging, getting them a good support system. And then of course, esteem, like think self-esteem, self-worth, working on processing that trauma and, regaining that sense of self-worth. This just really kind of shows that we kind of need to work up. And sometimes we need to go back down and work on a lower level and then go back up again. That happens quite often with our clients. So why our work is so important. We provide support to clients. I was just mentioning that sometimes we're the first support that they have. We establish safety and rapport with clients. Some clients, especially children, can be very slow to trust due to their control constantly being taken away due to abuse. We work really hard to establish that safety, trust, and rapport. We provide psychoeducation about trauma and its impact in a way the client can understand. So whether the client is concrete in their thinking, they're more abstract in their thinking, they're a child. We have multiple different ways on like the level of the brain or the body, or some therapies help us identify kind of different parts of ourselves that have held on to trauma. We find a way to explain that to them. And then you'll see clients sometimes have this aha moment where you see them kind of relax and go, oh, that's what's happening to me. Because when people get really dysregulated in their emotions, especially due to trauma, they don't really understand what's going on. And so we provide this crucial knowledge to help them make sense of what's happening. Sometimes we even have kids draw their feelings on a little gingerbread person outline, so they can identify like, oh, I feel worry in my belly, or, I feel angry in my head. And it kind of just helps them make sense of things that way. We also help clients develop and implement healthy coping skills. So think here like relaxation, deep breathing, mindfulness, interpersonal skills like implementing healthy boundaries, creative outlets such as drawing, painting, crafting, reading, journaling, appropriate physical outlets such as exercise, for kids, maybe, playing games or being involved in sports. For kids, punching a pillow or ripping paper, appropriate ways to deal with feelings, stretching, yoga, anything like that. And most importantly, we help clients improve their emotional and mental functioning, and we help them reduce those feelings of distress. So I'm going to give a little client success story. It's not a real client per se, but let's imagine it is, because I don't ever want a client to be identifiable. I've chosen a child because it's Child Abuse Prevention Month, and I kind of picked little pieces and parts from clients that I work with. So we'll just imagine, and I'm going to read it as if this is a specific child. So imagine a child who's witnessed abuse between her mother and father. The child comes to therapy with an inability to express her feelings, fits of anger at home and at school, and many intense fears, including loud noises, storms, and the dark. The child's caregiver wants her to be able to function better at school and at home and be able to talk about her feelings instead of having these fits of anger. So we worked on building trust in the first several sessions through art and play interventions. Then we worked on building up her skills, such as teaching her belly breathing. That's when little kids or adults put their hands on their chest and their belly and they feel their belly rise up and go down. We teach them how to properly breathe. We had her get a plush toy to touch and hold when she was feeling scared. We worked on finding words to describe feelings because sometimes young children don't even have that language, and we need to teach them about those different emotions and how they feel and how to use those words to describe how they're feeling. We used that little gingerbread outline I was talking about. We had her put down. She said she felt scared in her chest and her belly. She would feel angry in her fists, and she felt sad in her head. We also use what's called a trauma narrative, which is a part of trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy I was mentioning before. And we can do this in different forms. So with young kids, sometimes it's more of art. And I, as the therapist, helped kind of create the words for the story as she spoke. So what this child came up with was a story about a little girl who was swept away in a tornado. Her whole house was swept away. And then there was a fairy that came to her house and helped her rebuild her home and draw and play with the child and helped her feel so happy. The fairy taught her how to use feelings words like sad, mad, and scared. And the fairy also helped the child feel brave to overcome her fears. I'm happy to report that this child is able to express her feelings much better, use coping skills when she's feeling angry or fearful, and functions much better at home and at school. Just a little success story. This focus is on the successes, but just to kind of put it out there that of course many of our client stories are the most awful you can even imagine. I'm not going to share them here for many reasons, just kind of to put your mind to that. I wanted to impart on you the value that this specialized trauma therapy gives to clients. We provide the opportunity for healing and for hope, which is so important. So just quickly, some frequently asked questions we get. Is there a fee for service? Not currently. We're currently grant funded through VOCA, which is the Victims of Crime Act through the Ohio Attorney General's office. Is there a wait list? Yes, unfortunately. Because our services are so specialized and our therapists all have training and evidence-based treatments for trauma, and funding for more therapists is often really hard to find, we do often have a pretty lengthy waiting list. A question that I get sometimes when I do these type of presentations is how can I help a survivor? What should I do? Well, refer them to us would be great. In the moment, some things you can be mindful of is always be empathetic, non-judgmental, and genuine. Validate their feelings, provide affirmations such as saying like, it sounds like you feel lost right now, or it really seems like you're doing the best that you can. And always ask the person what they need. What should I not do if I encounter a survivor? And I do get asked this because of the re-traumatization. We never want to re-traumatize somebody. So just some little basics here. Don't share your own story of trauma, please. It may be triggering and it takes the focus off of the client and onto you. And I know that's not your intention, but that is the feeling that sometimes creates, especially if this person is not very known to you or have not shared their trauma before with you. You want to kind of just use that as a good guideline. Don't touch a survivor unless they request it. Might feel second nature to kind of sometimes put your hand on someone's back or offer a hug. But because touch can sometimes be something that is not soothing for survivors because of their abuse, we always want to wait until they request or invite it. If it's a child and they're crying and it seems like, may be appropriate, always ask them first or ask their caregiver, really both, right? May I give you a hug? Would you like a hug? Don't make any assumptions or judgments about survivors if you can avoid it. And don't tell them things like you have to leave him. Now, sometimes clients are in very dangerous situations. but we need to remember that they're the expert on themselves. They've been surviving this long, and often they have very good reasons for why they do what they do. Just offer your support. They'll tell you what they need, and if they don't know, again, refer them to us and just listen. At the very basic, just listening to them, sometimes just providing a listening ear can help much more tremendously than you might even imagine. So I really thank you so much for your time and attention today. I'm wondering if from Megan, if there were any questions in the chat, or if I can open it up to questions. I'll turn it over to you, Megan, unless anyone has a question.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Sam. So we do not have any questions in the chat. If folks have questions, go ahead and put them in there and we will answer them. I will be sending a follow-up email probably later this afternoon or early this morning, just with more information and a thank you for being here and attending. If you want, so we are wrapping up the final week of Child Abuse Prevention Month. We do have a second training tomorrow that is Child Abuse Know How to Respond. So some of those points that Sam touched upon about not touching children, asking first, etc., we're going to be having that training. The training tomorrow is free. It's from 12 to 1, but registration is required. And then also, if you have not already, check out our toolkit. That is for this month, and it is for all year long. We do these events for April for child abuse, October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, stalking in January, and dating violence in February. So I just want to say thank you again. If you have questions, you all should have my contact information. So if I am not the correct person, I can find out who that is, or always call our helpline. And I mentioned this in the chat because Sam talked about our JSTAT program. We have covered lunch and learns for Child Advocacy Center, Justice System Advocacy, Shelter, etc. A lot of our programs, so maybe not even during this month, but if you have those questions, those recordings, or you have a coworker that you think it would be really helpful for, those are there for us to talk about. And then follow us on social media, follow us on Instagram, Facebook, what have you. So thank you all again for being here. Hope that if you attended multiple of these, that you found these helpful. If you just attended today, welcome. Glad to see your faces. And Sam, thanks again for telling us about therapy. So appreciate it.
Thank you.